Taking a nice walk alone after dark? Trying to burn some calories when no one is around to bother you? Sounds nice, right? Well, you could be wrong, because certain entities out there may see that as an invitation to attack or torment you. Good luck out there. These are allegedly true scary stories about the worst you might see or experience if you walk at night. If you have a scary story of your own, send it to us at darkstories.org. I'd love to hear some closing shift stories. Also, if you'd rather listen to the show hands-free, follow the Darkness Prevails podcast on Spotify or iTunes, and review us on iTunes too if you've got time. Thank you. Now, let's begin. They came with the fog. From SummerShowers. I don't know what I saw. To this day, to think of that evening terrifies me. In 2017, on a beautiful May 1st, I took a hike up into the hills. I walked for a few hours and it was getting late. The sun would soon be setting, so I headed back down. About 30 minutes into my trek down, the fog began to slowly roll in. That's when I noticed how quiet it had grown. The hair on my arms and the back of my neck were standing up, like I had just pulled a shirt on from the dryer without using fabric softener. I started walking faster, and noticed what I first thought was a low hum, but the closer I got to the small grove alongside a creek, the better I could hear it. It was actually murmuring. I noticed movement between the trees. I thought at first it was deer, but then as the trees spread out, as I got closer, I saw it was women, or what looked like women. There were 9 of them, and they were like shimmering in and out, like a dimmer slowly turning down then up. The more they chanted, the more solid their forms appeared. I couldn't make out any of the words being said, it wasn't English, but I knew they were moving in a circle with their arms above their heads. And that's when I noticed the ripple-like quality to the air in the center of them. Like on a hot summer day, the way the heat will rise up from pavement. But this was the very air rippling. I must have made a sound, because one of them, with red hair, whipped around and looked straight at me. Her eyes were swirling like a storm. My ears started to ring and my stomach was rolling. I felt hot and clammy as I stumbled and ran down the hill. I fell several times, trying to look back to make sure nothing was chasing me. I made it back to the field where I'd started my hike, and I vomited my lunch up. I don't know who they were or what, I just know that those eyes were not human, and I have never hiked that area again. Something on the Hill, from Sonia, Shamoka. Growing up in Hamilton, I've come across my share of scares, hauntings, and ghosts. Hamilton is a very old town with an ample amount of history. We have a small town within our city called Ancaster. Ancaster is a small but cute and cozy town, just 15 minutes from Hamilton. In this city, there have been stories of hauntings taking place in an area called Hermitage. The Hermitage is an old abandoned mansion which can be found down a short path to a hidden place with an abundant amount of history and legend behind it. Many people have experienced paranormal events and have admitted to hearing and even seeing things, such as dark mists, shadows, animals with red bright eyes lurking in the bushes, and even a young boy that roams the grounds of the old mansion of the Hermitage ruins. I was a teenager at the time, and the year was 2002. My boyfriend, Aiden, just got his driver's license and wanted to go for a night drive. We invited a few of our friends along and decided to take a night walk of our own. We were a bit skeptical back then and young, so it wasn't our brightest idea we've ever had. We drove up to the Hermitage. It was about 9 p.m. in December, so it was pretty cold out and dark out around that time of year. We all agreed we would just take a quick walk around the grounds and head back to the car. As Aiden and I began to walk hand in hand through the snow-packed grass, we laughed to ourselves about how silly this all was, that there's no way we'll come across anything haunted. But then, I thought I'd seen something up ahead. I pulled Aiden's arm close to mine and whispered to him, "You see that little boy up ahead, right? Or are my eyes playing tricks on me?" He squinted his eyes to focus a bit better as he wore contacts. Then he looked at me and said, "That's definitely a little boy." The boy was sitting at the edge of a pretty high hill, the type of hill that would be used very good for tobogganing. Aiden was hesitant to proceed. He wasn't sure if what we were seeing was real or if it was some sort of joke, but what we saw was indeed a little boy. As I got closer, he seemed to be more real. He had a rather large, strange hat on. Not a cap or a winter hat. A strange-looking hat, like a pirate hat. He had long brown hair that fell below his ears, and a very long green jacket that buttoned all the way up, with tall brown rain boots. His pants were tucked into his boots, and strangely enough, he was holding a fishing rod in his hand. The rod looked homemade. It was a wooden rod. That's when Aiden and I looked at one another with fear and confusion. Why is this little boy alone? Where are his parents? And why does he have a fishing rod? Is he real? Or is this a ghost? Only one way to find out, I thought to myself. I approached the little boy, then asked him, "Hi there. Are you here all alone, or did you get lost?" The young boy put down his fishing rod to the right side of him, looked up at me with his large, deep blue eyes and skin as fair as the snow. He began to fix his oversized hat and smiled, then giggled, and said, "Of course not, Mum. I'm waiting for my father. You see, we are supposed to be going fishing today. It is rather a nice day to be going fishing, if I do say so myself. I am just waiting for him. Any moment now. Any moment." I was officially freaked out. I was just a young teenager myself. Why was he referring to me as ma'am? He didn't talk the way a normal kid would talk either. His accent, which sounded almost British, it was very proper, and was not from around here. He sounded like he came from the 1800s or something. And it wasn't a nice day to be going fishing. It was cold, and there was snow on the ground. Aiden grabbed my hand in complete fear and whispered to me, "Let's get out of here. I really don't think that's a real kid." I looked back at the boy to let him know we should be heading home as it's getting late out, but we can wait until his dad gets back. I couldn't believe my eyes. He wasn't there. He was gone. There's no way he could have possibly gotten up and ran into the bushes or anywhere in sight. We would have seen him or heard him running through the snow, yet he just vanished, as if he was never there to begin with. The only thing that remained was his wooden fishing rod. I looked at Aiden in complete terror, and we both began running as fast as we could. We called his friends who had taken another path to get back to the car, because we just experienced something unreal and had no time to explain. They said they had seen something creepy too. We all met back up at the car, yet every time we unlocked the car, it would automatically lock again, so we weren't out of the woods just yet. Aiden looked at me and shouted, "Why do you have his fishing rod? You should have left it." I pulled my tote bag from around my body to see what he was talking about, and I saw the fishing rod sticking out of it. In complete terror, I assured Aiden I didn't take the rod. I didn't understand how it ended up in my bag. Our friends looked at us with fear in their eyes and said, "Wait, you guys saw a boy near the woods waiting for his dad?" We said yes and were beyond horrified. How could the same boy be in two places at once? This couldn't be happening. I threw the rod into the bushes and ran back to the car. 10 minutes of trying to unlock the car, the doors finally unlocked. We all scrambled into the car and buckled up. Aiden started the car and locked the doors. He hit the gas pedal as hard as physically possible. I had seen a reflection in the side mirror as we drove off. It was the little boy we had seen at the hill, standing there with the fishing rod I threw into the bushes. He was waving at us as we drove by. But he had a sad look on his face. This time, he wasn't alone. A taller, older gentleman was standing behind him with one hand over the boy's shoulder. I could only assume it was his father. They slowly vanished into the darkness as we gained speed, driving away. Aiden noticed I was zoned out and yelled out, "Hello, Earth to Trish, you good?" I didn't want to frighten him or our friends even more, so I didn't tell him what I'd just seen. I replied, "Yeah, just shaken up, that's all." He grabbed my hand and kissed it, and continued to drive away into the cold, dark roads. We never returned to the Hermitage ruins again. Warning: the following story contains depictions of violence against animals. The Ghosts of the Scary Dairy, from Arevalo 805. So I'm from a small city just northwest of Los Angeles. This event haunts me even to this very day. I myself am a person who does not believe in gods or devils, but I do believe people leave an energy. Once they die, that energy represents their lives, some negative, some positive. My area isn't known for much, other than the California Strawberry Festival, and this university built on the ruins of an abandoned insane asylum. When I was 18 years old, my friend and his cousin who used to hang out with us at the time were extremely bored one day. We decided it was really late, so let's go do some stupid stuff. You know, typical childish things. We began looking up supposedly haunted buildings near us, and the first thing to pop up was the university. Being from the area, you hear stories about it all the time, whether it's people walking down the street or some of your friends. We decided as a group to see what all the hype was about, so we drove off to the area. Now, let it be known there are two specific areas people visit: the remnant building of the dairy farm and the last surviving building of the actual asylum. For this trip, we decided to park the car near the hiking trail toward the dilapidated dairy farm and half-destroyed building. This trail is a normal hiking trail many people use during the day, either for leisurely walks or with dogs, or sometimes even horses. It's relatively nice being in Southern California. Even at night, the temperature was around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And the trail is somewhat small, fitting no more than 3 people at a time, which was perfect because there were 3 of us. This trail runs alongside several hills leading up toward the school. It's a well-known natural habitat for various animals, from coyotes and mountain lions to deer and rattlesnakes. Knowing this, we decided to bring along a few pocket knives and even a 17-inch Bowie knife. Why we needed one that big was really beyond me, but better to have it and not need it, you know. So we began walking the hiking trail like anyone would at 12 o'clock at night, simply enjoying the scenery that was visible on an almost moonless night. But with our flashlight on hand, everything within 20 feet was clearly visible. However, as we continued walking, roughly 15 to 20 minutes later, the normal wildlife began to come to life, adjusting to our presence. After another 20 minutes or so, we came across a very large tree directly next to a fenced-off area. There was also a metal frame for an old-style barn, exactly like you picture in movies and the like. Once we got to this point, we decided to turn off our lights, which proved to be a bad idea, when out of literally nowhere, every small creature that would make noise grew silent. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, fast and incomprehensible. Immediately after, my buddy asked, "Did you see that?" I turned to see which direction he was facing. I noticed he was looking the same direction I'd been facing before, and all this time his cousin was frozen with fear as he stared into the barn. As I look into the seemingly empty barn, I notice several fast-moving and tall, shadowy figures. Each one darts back and forth from one side of the barn to the other, without making a single sound. With the thought coming across my mind these are just pranksters, I quickly remembered the very barn itself was closed off by a chain-link fence on all sides. So if someone had been in there, running that fast you'd collide into the fence in a vain attempt to decelerate. As I continued looking, my friend taps my shoulder and says, "Hey dog, point your light into the trail, yeah?" I do as requested, although I wish I hadn't. I look to see a tall shadow in the shape of a humanoid form, but standing far taller than myself. With that, my friend's cousin instantly started running the opposite direction back towards the car, and we began to follow suit. Before making it back to the car, I began looking around to see any other people that might be on the trail, but all I see are several large shadows running stride for stride with us, keeping pace. After running out of breath, my friend, his cousin, and myself quickly turned back around. One of them whispered "Don't look behind us." It was a strange request, but it was too late. To my horror, there walking behind us was the body of a man. His head was missing, as if it had been torn off, and everything from the knees down wasn't visible, not because I couldn't see it, but because it didn't exist. The thing seemed to be floating. The figure continued walking or floating towards us as we tried walking faster to avoid all contact with the being. Other dismembered bodies and shadows appeared along with it as we walked, but they soon began to vanish the closer we grew to the main road where I had parked. With safety no more than 100 yards away, instead of the normal sounds of small animals returning, we heard something worse. A coyote had sounded frightened, not 20 feet away from our location in a patch of brush. The small creature began yelping and screeching as if fighting for its life or being attacked, the sounds of pain flooding from its vocal cords. Shortly after, within the span of 10 seconds, the yelping stopped and was replaced by the sound of flesh being ripped clean from the bone. Then there was the sharp crack of bones and sticks breaking, mangled and crushed by something far bigger than that coyote. As the sound slowly went quiet, we had all begun running without saying a word to each other. We ran without any signs of stopping until we made it to the car. The sounds of something running alongside us filled us all to the very brim with fear. And as soon as my car had come into view, the car beeped to signal its unlocking doors. That sound had never been so amazing. We threw ourselves into the seats without even buckling up. I turned the ignition, and once the engine started, I began to drive. This will forever haunt me, but not as bad as the second trip to the scary dairy. I, against my better judgment, decided to go again to experience that sorrow. I'm now 23 years old, and I can tell you this. There are things in our world not so readily explained. However, the truth is out there, and either you can search it out, or you can let it find you in even the darkest corners of not only the world, but your very dreams. The Darkness of Jericho Bridge, from Sarah Snooks 13. This took place in Kingsville, Maryland, U.S. Let me start by saying that I'm a sensitive and an empath. I can sense spirits and such, and sometimes communicate with them. I know it sounds crazy, but I've been this way my whole life. I've had a lot of creepy and unexplainable things happen to me throughout my life, but this is one of the scariest experiences I've had, and I wanted to share my story. This happened in August of 2018. My friend Olga and I had been trying to plan a night to go ghost hunting for months, and I was finally able to get a babysitter for my son for the night. We figured we would check out 3 allegedly haunted locations nearby, including the infamous Jericho covered bridge. This is one of the few original covered bridges in Maryland, and the only one in Harford County. Now, a small background about this bridge real quick. It was built in 1865 over a small creek, connecting a very narrow road, and about a mile north of the bridge there is a historic mill and village. Local lore states there have been multiple deaths in the surrounding area near the bridge, and on the bridge itself, including animal sacrifices and satanic rituals in the woods between the village and the bridge. You can actually get to this clearing where these rituals were said to have been performed, and you can still see the markings on the trees. They say if you stop in the middle of the bridge after midnight, turn your car off, flash your lights 3 times, and beep your horn 3 times, you'll see someone hanging from the rafters in your rear view mirror. I've never done this the times I've driven through the area, because I was always alone and could feel the energy of the place. Back to my story. So Olga and I decided she would pick me up around 10 that evening, and then we would pick up another friend, Alicia, then head to the first location. We were pretty nervous, but excited at the same time. Even though I'm a sensitive, I still try not to have any expectations when I go to creepy places, because a fair amount of them weren't really haunted at all. Olga picked me up at 10, then we got Alicia, as planned. We then headed to our first destination, which was an old plantation about 20 minutes away from my place. It was a huge manor house and barn that was all the way at the end of a quarter-mile-long driveway, so it wasn't visible from the street, except for the fence that lined the property. I had Olga pull over into the grass in front of the fence, but we quickly had to leave because there were people outside of the neighboring house. This was private property, and we didn't want to get in trouble. So we headed to our next destination, which was Jericho Bridge. We wanted to take it a step further and decided to park in the lot near the village and walk down Jericho Road toward the bridge instead of doing the whole car trick. By this time it was still relatively early, maybe about 11 p.m., so I was more worried about us getting hit by a car rather than seeing ghosts. The bridge is part of a public road that is decently well traveled by local traffic after all. The road also isn't very well lit, apart from a light at the intersection of the road near the village, and some newly installed lights at each end of the bridge, leaving the long walk in between extremely dark. We had to use our cell phone flashlights to light our way. As we walked down Jericho Road, everything seemed relatively normal. Birds and bugs made their night sounds and all, and thankfully no cars came by. Then, as soon as we reached the light in front of the northern entrance of the bridge, I immediately picked up on something there. Olga and I both began to see our breath, which was extremely odd because, like I said, it was August, a very warm night for August too, close to 80 degrees. So there was no reason for that to happen. And the even stranger part was that it was only Olga and I who could see our breath, not Alicia. That made me think whatever was with us was drawn to Olga and I. As we walked through the bridge, I began to pick up on some of the spirits there. They were positive and playful, and didn't make me feel threatened at all, even though it almost felt like someone was directly behind me, following me around the bridge the whole time. I had made it to the middle of the bridge when there was an immediate shift in energy, and I got a message. You need to go, and you need to go now. I continued walking through the bridge. I was outside of the south entrance when suddenly I was so overwhelmed with energy I thought I was about to pass out. It was as if I stepped into a vortex or something. When I managed to snap out of whatever energy field I was in, I felt something very dark and very negative. At that moment, we all three heard what sounded like someone humming from under the bridge. We tried recording it on our phones, but none of us could get the sound to work on the videos. It was silent, like all of our phones were muted while recording. It was so weird. Olga had been leaning over the stone wall that lined the road to try and see if there was someone down there. She said, "I think I see someone under there." I replied, "Olga, we need to leave. We need to go right now. I'm getting really negative vibes." Then she started pointing. By then, I already knew what she was pointing at. She says, "Do you see that?" "No, but I can feel it," I replied. Then we started running towards where we parked, and as we made it past a small trail that led into the woods, something loudly whispered in an almost childlike but demonic voice, "Come with me." The three of us looked at each other with terrified expressions, and Olga exclaimed, "Did you hear that?" "Yeah, we need to get out of here." We got slightly further when Olga tells us, "Stop, it's right in front of us." I was looking ahead into the darkness and let my eyes adjust when I saw it. There was a huge black mass in the middle of the road, much darker than all of its surroundings. It looked like a 7-foot-high solid black cloud, and it emanated evil energy. After maybe 10 seconds or so, it flew off into the field to the right of the street. We started running again. We made it about 20 feet when I heard Olga cry in pain behind me. I whipped around and saw her bent down, lifting her legging on her left leg slightly above her ankle, revealing 3 fresh, bloody scratch marks on the back of her ankle. I went to help her stand up when all of a sudden her key fob, which was hooked to her lanyard with a brand new climbing carabiner clip, flew off the lanyard on its own about 6 feet away from us in the middle of the street. We picked it up and booked it back to the car. I didn't mention this before, but the entire way back to the car from the bridge, we continued to see our breath. It was following us to the car until we got inside and sped away. We still went to our final destination, which was a local historic mansion, but we were so shaken and in shock of what happened at the bridge, we just walked around the mansion once and left. Fast forward to the following week, I was telling one of my clients at work about my experience at the bridge, because she's also big into paranormal stuff and the occult. She informs me that in the 80s to 90s, there was a coven of witches who performed a ritual as an attempt to trap the evil thing under the bridge. They put markings on the floorboards of the bridge and outside the entryways as well. But in 2015, the bridge was remodeled, and some of the original boards which bore those markings were replaced, therefore releasing the entity. It really freaked me out hearing all of that. But Memorial Day of the following year, my then boyfriend, now fiance, and I decided to have a picnic in the park near the historic village. The park has a couple of trails, including one that goes from the mill to the covered bridge. This trail is beautiful, running alongside the creek and back through the woods, and ending at the north entrance of the bridge. I wanted to try and walk it to the end since it was daytime, and I had my boyfriend with me. I felt safe, but I was wrong. We walked maybe 15 minutes into the trail when I got to a point where I just couldn't go any further. I don't know how far it was from the bridge or where I was in relation to the bridge, because I couldn't see it. But it made me uncomfortable, and I knew it would be a bad time if I went further. So we turned around. I haven't been anywhere near that area since, nor will I ever. What I felt that night was evil, and I really don't want to experience it again. To those of you who plan on attempting to ghost hunt at the Jericho covered bridge, do not go alone and keep your guard up. And under any circumstances, do not try to use any spirit boards or Ouija boards, or try and conduct seances, because this is only going to invite that negative thing in. There are many people who go and don't experience a thing. Hopefully you can be one of those people, because you could end up getting way more than you bargained for.